like to invite Willie Watt to come down and join me at the table now. Willie is the chair of the Scottish National Investment Bank, and it's wonderful to be sitting in person with Willie Watt. We both serve as trustees for the National Gallery of Scotland, so we've been looking at each other's faces on Zoom a lot this year.
I didn't realise how tall you were.
Yeah, well, you've got legs, so that's a surprise. The bank is publicly owned. It was launched just last year. And prior to being chair of the bank, Willie served as chair and CEO of Martin Currie, an Edinburgh-based specialist international public equities investment firm. So, Willie, tell us a bit about Scottish National Investment Bank and its missions.
Well, firstly, it's great to be here, and I wasn't able to join you yesterday, but that was quite helpful to me to hear what was said this morning and to see those presentations. And of course, we couldn't get a better example of natural capital in terms of some of those oak trees out there are truly stunning. Anyway, the Scottish National Investment Bank is a mission-based development bank for Scotland. So the missions are the transition to net zero, place-based inequality, and innovation. And those three missions, I think, are all relevant to finance for nature. As we've heard, communities are a significant part of the overall natural capital picture. The Scottish Government has promised the bank £200 million of capital each year over the next 10 years, and we aim to find projects that meet our missions to invest that capital wisely. Now, given the scale of the missions, £200 million a year is not sufficient to tackle them in any full way, so we plan to earn the right to do two things additionally to government capital. First is to raise private capital to invest alongside the government capital. To do that, we need to be regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority, and we're looking at that at the moment. The second thing is to earn trusted public body status, which will allow us to borrow on our own balance sheet. And so with those two subsidiary pools of capital, we will be able to do more as time goes on. What is important for us is that we meet the mission impacts, but also invest in commercial projects. Because, as all of us know, we will not tackle the challenges that face us unless we can lever in private capital. And the bank can play a role as a catalyst to bring in that private capital by proving that positive net returns as well as mission benefits can be derived from its projects. And
can you give us a few examples then of mission-oriented projects that have been invested in?
Yes, we've invested in an early stage company that uses the Internet of Things and satellites to monitor infrastructure structures without having to send guys in trucks and around to look at bridges and railway lines and pipelines. We've invested in a heat storage company based in Scotland, which has innovative technology to tackle the big problem of residential heat, which is one of the most intractable net zero challenges that we're all currently faced with. And we've invested in a better than zero carbon building products company called Indie Nature, which is using agricultural products to transform into construction materials. And then we've also invested in a forestry fund set up by Gresham Capital, one of the leading forestry financiers in the UK. And what's different about that fund is the emphasis on new planting and the emphasis on native species. It is a commercial forestry fund, so it's not all native species, but the ratio of native species is higher than in traditional forestry funds. And because it was a slightly different type of fund, it needed cornerstoned, and the bank provided the cornerstone financing for that fund. For us, the impact, we make sure that the impacts are there by having covenants into our financing. So if that fund says it will have a ratio of native planting to commercial planting, we will measure that every year, or they will measure it and report to us, so that we know that they're sticking to what it was that we all signed up to. And you'll find that as an element of all of the investments that we make, this mission reporting and impact reporting, which we heard a little bit about, from the Scottish Rural College, the importance of, I think you used the phrase, investors need high quality data.
Yes,
I totally agree. Yeah,
data.
decision grade data, much better phrase. Decision grade data. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, and I mean, the balance of how you assess the commercial return and then how you assess those covenanted and social and environmental returns, I think we'll need that decision grade data, because citizens will want to see it as well as the investors. Yeah. This bank's publicly owned. How will communities, how will the people of Scotland have equity from it too?
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the good things about the bank is that if those projects that I talked to you about are profitable, we will recycle the capital into the bank. So the bank's balance sheet will grow, and it will create a fund for the people of Scotland. 200 million a year, given the scale of the problems, doesn't sound a huge amount. But as that incrementally grows, if we make successful projects, we can reinvest that money for the people of Scotland. The way that you put it, Hannah, is very much the way that we see it.
Yeah.
What we plan to do is we'll report on, we'll create a mission report every year for public consumption. Our business plans are open to scrutiny by anyone. They're all on our website. We'll publish the detailed, if you like, impact information as well as the financial information. And we're in, as you said, the startup phase, but once we're fully sort of staffed and resourced, we will be planning to communicate with communities around Scotland, and we have a stakeholder engagement team that very much sees that as part of its role.
Okay. I wanted to ask a kind of reflective question about growth rates. So, capitalism is kind of dependent on talking about growth rates.
Yes.
How do we sustain that with just one planet that we're currently degrading?
It's a very good question. There was, I don't know if any of you saw it yesterday, I'm sure some of you did. There was a very interesting article in the Financial Times on this topic by Dasgupta, the economist, and he was making the point that the depletive issues around the natural environment and also its benefits were not properly priced into economist models. And therefore GDP is not really a sustainable measure of growth. And I think, that's quite an important thing for financiers and those that run commercial business to understand. But we still need growth, because partly to do with inequality, both in our own country, but more so across the developing world. We can't just say we're having no more growth and everyone just stays where they are, because that's clearly A, unacceptable to huge populations around the world, and B, certainly isn't fair. But the sustainability of growth has to be reassessed. And therefore, depletion of natural capital needs to come with greater penalties, and the monetization of the restoration of natural capital, and those examples of these businesses that are looking at how natural capital can be monetized, I thought were interesting examples of how, if once you start breaking it down into its component parts, there are actually a significant number of ways in which natural capital regeneration can be monetized. But I think more needs to be done on that, and I was quite taken by the Chancellor's statement the other day about requiring large listed companies to come up with net zero plans, because when a listed company has to do that, it will then have to look for ways in which it can offset, because net zero doesn't mean everyone's zero. It means that there will still be carbon consumption, but there has to be more of an effort to balance that up. And therefore, I think the valuation of restorative assets will become more significant. And I think what will happen, I mean, this is all voluntary now, but in discussions that I've had, I think the plan will ultimately be that the financial regulator will expect these plans to be credible, and shareholders will not invest in companies that don't have credible net zero plans. So I think that's good for natural capital.
Yeah, we had very interesting discussions with the TNFD here yesterday, who were beginning to reveal all of their methods and processes for helping companies report that. So, you've seen some great natural capital, nature-based projects here. Can they get your number and give you a call?
Well, yes, of course they can. We invest between £1 million and £50 million in projects, and we are able to invest in community projects as well as commercial businesses, I think we see this as an exciting area. We're trying to engage with other actors, and what I would say is that the role that we play in the financial structure is usually, there's often grant availability, there's commercial finance, and we often are in that kind of keystone position between the two, where we've talked earlier about risk reward. And different risk reward buckets, if I can use such a crude word, but we're trying to, probably take a higher risk, still with a positive reward than the commercial capital, but more reward and less risk than the grants. So that positioning in the capital stack, as we investment people like to call it, is the one that a development bank like SNIB can play.
Willie, sorry we've run out of time, but thank you ever so much for joining us here at Ross Priory, and thank you for joining the 50 audience who are with us online as well today. Let's thank Willie. Thank you.